Did you know my eyes used to be brown? Before I start, I must beg of you one thing. Do not speculate about my identity. You already know who I am. If you have passed a radio in the local shops even once over the last decade, you've heard my voice. Perhaps you've been a rabid fan at my concerts. Perhaps you physically recoil at the sound of my lisp. Perhaps you're entirely neutral towards me. Love me or hate me, you know me. My situation is extremely unique, so it is difficult to anonymize my story. So please, if you can think of anything that may help me, share it, but keep my situation between us. Since I was a lad, I've been prone to acne, of all places on the sides of my neck. My parents, my teachers, and the town's doctor swore up and down that it was hormonal, temporary. Once my growth spurt finished, they assured me it would be a thing of the past. The thing that annoyed me the most about this acne is that it never came to a head. No way to pop it and find relief in watching the pus ooze out, feeling it deflate. This didn't stop me from trying. I would struggle for what seemed like hours in the mirror, squeezing the hard bumps between my two forefingers in hopes that they'd burst. It never happened. Instead, my acne would only grow angrier, more inflamed when I tried. I would enter the bathroom with a neck speckled with small rosy bumps, visible only up close. I'd exit with what looked like huge welts, no closer to being popped than when I approached the mirror in the first place. My skin and ego would be bruised. I learned to wear my hair long to cover it up. When I was a younger teenager, it looked greasy, oafish. Though I will admit I grew into the look quite a bit as time went on. The fairer sex took a liking to the sensitive, long-haired poet type I had become. My confidence increased exponentially as a result, thank God. But I would still come home to the bathroom mirror all the same. No matter how secure in myself I felt, the mirror was my grave reminder of my embarrassment of a neck. I must apologize for droning on about this topic for so long. It was a big deal in the way that acne is a big deal to teenagers. No one around me seemed to notice, or if they did, they didn't care. It didn't affect the one thing that was most important to me at the time: singing. I set up with my guitar around my tiny town, at first on the streets that weren't so crowded. A low-stakes test run, if you will. I'd open my wee notebook to one of the dozens of poems I had set to a melody, and bare my heart to the world. I loved the attention, and boy did I get a lot of it. At the end of those first performances, I'd find my guitar case overflowing with more than a couple of quid. With my confidence boosted, I'd then move to the town's main streets, then the square. I was 17, about to go to university, and I was doing about as well as one could do in our sleepy village. I was playing cafes, pubs, a party or two. It was beginning to look like an actual viable career option for me, much to my parents' chagrin. Eyes were on me now, a lot of eyes. If I chose to forego uni and take a shot at a musical career, that would mean even more eyes on me, and they wouldn't be as kind as my neighbors and friends. I knew my music and lyrics could stand the test of the most judgmental ear, but to be a singer you must also, of course, look the part. As I was becoming a little local celebrity, my acne worsened. I was prescribed a slew of ointments and pills and dealt with the numerous side effects: dryness, itching, peeling. But no medicine made the slightest dent in the issue at hand. The hard bumps underneath the surface of my skin persisted. Eventually, I booked my first ever venue in the next village over. It was an actual concert venue, albeit a small one, and I was set to play as an opener for a local band. This would mean my biggest audience yet. Coincidentally, I also had my biggest acne flare yet at that time. One pustule, larger than the rest, was stationed threateningly close to the center of my neck. I would barely be able to cover it up with my hair. How I tortured myself for days before the event, praying to whatever god that would listen to just let this one pop. I tried everything. Sticking it with a needle, covering it with toothpaste, caking it with my mother's old concealer. The eyesore on my neck remained glaringly obvious. Finally, half an hour before the concert, the biggest one of my life so far, I gave it one last-ditch effort in the venue's bathroom mirror, and my dreams came true. The skin split and out-leaked thick gummy spurts of yellow-green pus. It must have drained for over 30 seconds from the small fissure in my skin. I am not above admitting I let out a moan of pleasure. The thing that I had been wanting to happen for a full decade finally happened. When it was spent, I wiped it clean with one of those rough brown paper towels from a dispenser on the wall, and there on my neck was an unmistakable green eye. The skin surrounding it looked doughy, false. It reminded me of the liquid latex I had applied to myself one Halloween to create the illusion of zombie skin sloughing off. But I touched it gingerly along the eye's lid, and I could feel that the skin was as sensitive as my eyelids. It was connected to my nerve endings. It was mine. The bright green eye and the exact color of the infected pus stared back at me in the mirror. I was horrified, my breath suddenly ragged. The white of the eye was pinkish, the pupil dilated. It had sparse blondish lashes on either side of the crusty gash that was the lid. It quivered alive, seeing, and after a moment it blinked at me. I gasped and jumped back from the mirror. I was frozen. A knock came at the door and the stagehand gave me a 5-minute warning, said I was needed on stage. The eye was on the center right side of my neck. I looked back and forth between the bathroom door and the mirror. Another knock on the door, more urgent this time. At a loss for what to do, I pulled up my t-shirt up and around my neck, then buttoned up my jacket over it, creating the illusion of wearing a turtleneck. Yes, that's where my signature look came from, believe it or not. I digress. I exited the bathroom and made my way to the stage. It was my best set yet. I'll be honest, I don't know how I managed it. Though I was merely the opener, a position usually doomed to a half-hearted smattering of slow claps, I got extended applause at the end of almost every song. I could feel the reverberation of the music around the hall, the audience moving and reacting to my lyrics. I swear even the headliner didn't get as much response. On any other night, my spirits would have soared, but clearly I was a bit preoccupied. After the set, I rushed back to the bathroom to check my neck. I was hoping, praying that the eye was in my imagination, a result of pre-show jitters, but I pulled my makeshift turtleneck down and there it was, blinking at me while nestled among my neck acne. I didn't have time to ponder too long. The bathroom door burst open and I was dragged out into the crowd to celebrate by my cheering friends and family. My career took off quickly from that point. I was invited to play larger venues after the success of my first show. You must forgive my ego, but my talent only improved as I began to become the artist you know today. My lyrics became more poetic, tenfold, my melodies more hypnotic. I was just entering my 20s and I was on the rise. Somehow my concern about the eye took a back seat. Fame is all-encompassing after all, and though the eye on the side of my neck was no longer my biggest concern, it was still there. It became a pre-show ritual, in the restroom or green room or whatever back room to fiddle with my turtleneck until it concealed the problem to my satisfaction. I knew the eye still stared at me beneath whatever color of stretch cotton covered it up that day. I could feel it. I could never communicate with it. Yes, I did try to talk to it like a madman, Blink thrice if you can understand me. So mortifying to admit, but it never blinked twice, let alone thrice. It followed a movement occasionally, but infrequently enough that I was never sure if it was a coincidence or not. It was always trained on my bloody face. I was so used to having the countless eyes of a sea of concert-goers fixed on me, so eventually it didn't unsettle me quite the way it once had. One extra eye was nothing. My acne still hadn't cleared up either, but now I knew better than to test my luck by trying to pop anything else on my neck. As time passed, I was finally able to grow a substantial enough beard to cover up the problem entirely. I grew it longer and thicker to ensure there were no accidental peeks or slips or glances. And finally, after 3 years paying my dues opening for other bands and singers, it was time for me to be the headliner. It wasn't a small venue either, to my delight. More eyes than ever would be on me. Everything had to be flawless from now on. My performances, my appearances. I had to manage the absolute behemoth that my beard had become over the years. Right after I signed with my first manager, the first thing he said to me was that the caveman look wasn't easy to sell. Stick to the turtlenecks if I was that insecure about my acne. So I shaved, of course. I was careful, of course. Not careful enough, of course. First, I reduced the massive beard to a manageable stubble with my clippers, and there as always was the eye, chartreuse in color and grotesquely blank. It had inched forth over time directly to the right of my Adam's apple. I had then switched to a disposable razor to rid my face of the stubble completely when I nicked my skin. I drew in a sharp breath. It felt like I hit another pustule, the same deep pain as the first time. Once again, sickly lime discharge streamed out as I held a washcloth to it, cursing myself in the mirror. I pulled away the cloth. There, on the center of my neck, 2 eyes stared back at me. One eye was an anomaly, something that maybe I could one day laugh at. I envisioned myself down the road, being interviewed on a late-night show and sharing it with the host as a fun, freaky fact about myself, the way one does with an extra toe. It was a mere oddity palatable. 2 eyes suggested something more sinister. The first eye looked at me, it always had, but 2 eyes moving in unison, saw. It was at that moment I realized I was in danger. The eyes looked at me, judged me, wanted something from me. But they said nothing, barely blinked. Now that the eye had a twin, I realized how oddly enchanting they were. What was once waxy eyelid skin and repulsive lashes was now smooth, glowy. The infected pus-colored irises, alluring. They were beautiful among the pockmarks and acne, terrifying. It was then that my phone rang. I fumbled with it before being able to answer, but somehow I managed to pick up. My agent was on the other end, screaming. It sounded awful, painful. What? I asked the phone, increasingly panicked. Turns out it was excitement, not fear. My agent, a rookie like me, told me the label we'd been trying to get in contact with finally heard my EP, and they wanted a meeting with me the next day. My superfans will know my rise to fame from there. Though it was swift, it wasn't very notable. Opened for the right bands at the right venues at the right time, combined with some genius marketing promotion, mixed with a viral video or 2. The perfect cocktail to fame. I went from a few thousand records sold to a few mil in the span of a year. Tickets that went for 20 quid at the beginning of my tour were being resold for hundreds by the end. You've probably heard this story about dozens of different artists. My story isn't very distinguishing from the outside perspective, but I lived in fear constantly. The eyes never did anything but watch me, but that was enough. I knew the other shoe would drop sooner or later. Fame is all-encompassing after all. After I'd get off the stage at my concerts, I'd run to the green room and check and recheck my turtleneck to make sure it hadn't revealed anything. I refused any and all interviews, made a name for myself as a notorious hermit who was rarely seen out on the town, never dated, barely left my flat. My agent hated it, my manager hated it, the label hated it. It would suit them better to have me act like a regular rock star, date actresses and models to fuel my fame. And as much as I'd love to be dating models too, my situation doesn't allow for it. All these eyes on me require absolute perfection on my part, and the eyes literally on me are anything but perfect. Any person close to me is a liability. My fan base loved my persona, though they obviously didn't know the full extent of it. But my loneliness lends itself to the lovely lyrics of pain, isolation, anguish that they just lap up. So I stayed home, rejected interviews, until one day my hand was forced. My label was concerned by my reclusion, worried that the bit would run thin. I was quite well known among the female 12 to 18 demographic, but pop stars can blink out in an instant. So they said to accept an exclusive interview on late night, or they'd drop me. I agreed on the basis that I could grow my beard back before the event. They begrudgingly accepted my terms, and I did. They advertised, sensationalized, scandalized the interview for months beforehand. There were several Instagram accounts dedicated to counting down to the moment of my first public appearance ever. Posters on the tube, advertisements on YouTube. The nation's tweens waited with bated breath to know what I was like in conversation. So did I. You see, I had by this point grown quite worried. Years in social isolation does something to a person, deteriorates his proclivity for interesting conversation. If I were to embarrass myself on late night, in a time where a man's failure could be nearly packaged and repurposed online for clickbait, it would be the end of me. Worse, I hadn't written any new music since the appearance of The Second Eye. I lived in a constant state of paranoia. It doesn't lend itself to composing. If the host asked me about my next project, I would fall flat. I started practicing conversation in the mirror with the only person I had readily available, myself. Luckily, I had another pair of eyes to stare into. I'd pin my beard to the sides and practice quips about my upbringing. Of course, I was my parents' favorite. I was an only child, and I swear they'd flash approving. But more often than not, I'd fall flat, a frightful conversationalist, and they'd stare blankly. I was doomed. The months passed, and finally the night came. A half hour before I was set to go on the show, I was in the green room of the TV studio. I had gone around with the show's film crew trying slices of authentic New York pizza that afternoon, and they were screening the footage they had cut together for a segment on the program. It was deeply, heartbreakingly unfunny. For someone that writes songs that woo the masses, I couldn't string a sentence together for the life of me. You can tell the editors had pulled magic out of a hat to make me appear somewhat personable. My worst performance yet. I looked in the mirror, hating myself. I pulled my beard to the side and looked myself in the eyes. "Please," I begged, "I just need this to go well." The eyes looked at me, saw me, gave me what I wanted. In the mirror, I watched my other eyes close. It looked like they weren't there at all. Below them, a faint wrinkle just above my collarbone, likely caused by years of looking down at my guitar, deepened. The skin pulled back into itself, creating a deep crevice extending across and into my neck. It looked as if my head and neck were detached at the shoulders, merely resting in a balance on them. The eyes reopened 3 inches above the wrinkle, blinked. I felt a pull towards the crevice. Something told me exploring the fold would give me exactly what I was meant to have. I reached with both hands up to the split in my skin. I grabbed, with my left fingers hooked into the lower half and my right fingers in the upper portion, and pulled apart. The skin squelched and tore as my hands wrenched the crevice open. I tried to scream but couldn't. When I moved my blood-soaked hands away, the two eyes on my neck had an accompanying, perfectly formed mouth. Slightly darkened skin on the edges formed paper-thin lips, and just beyond them were fully developed teeth, a smooth, wet tongue. Again, I tried to scream, speak, anything, but it's as if my vocal cords no longer belonged to me. The green room was quiet now, but any moment a PA would be requesting my presence on stage. I could do nothing but look at my own reflection, at my new face, and wonder what the audience would think when they saw me. And then my new face moved, crept north toward my head. The eyes seemed to open new skin along my neck with a slight tearing noise as they moved upward, the skin sealing up where they once had been. The mouth and the acne surrounding it pushed up as well. As this happened, my own face began to rise, to move back towards my hairline. I felt the skin at the base of my skull begin to fold in on itself as my face moved to the top of my head. I flailed, but I felt as if I wasn't in complete control of my own hands any longer. The new face reached its resting spot where my face had once been. I stared up at the ceiling, my face now at the crown of my skull. My hands grabbed at my face, not the new one, and realized my nose had stayed where it was. My beard was now between my old and new faces, a makeshift sort of fringe across my forehead. It was a massive effort to even raise my hands for this long, and I was at a complete loss for what to do, as I had been several times before. But now there was no covering up my hideous secret. Then came the inevitable knock on the door from the production assistant, willing to escort me to the stage. It sounded faint, far away. With the last of my strength, I brushed my hair over my face, so it reached my beard and concealed me. My vision went dark and I could hear nothing. I knew nothing of what happened on the show. Not exactly. I woke up in bed, my face in its regular place, to an endless feed of text singing praise for my appearance the night prior. According to them, I looked stunning, I was hilarious, I was charming, I was perfect. Not one message hinted that anything could have been amiss. I grabbed at a mirror on my nightstand. There, in the morning light, the face on my neck remained. I did watch the interview a few days later, after I had recovered from the shock of what happened. The messages were correct. Or rather it, did stupendously. It recounted my childhood, painted the street, busking it in a rosy light. It spoke about my acne problem, back when it was only an acne problem, as a relatable anecdote, cracked good-natured jokes with the host like it was nothing, played along with his games on screen, shook hands with, hugged members of the audience. It also hinted heavily at my next album, coming soon. And all the while it was ruggedly handsome. The sickly green eyes were more of a golden hue on camera. The thin lips weren't an issue as they wielded a charming grin. Even the acne looked good on it. It looked better than I had in years. My social media following had tripled, my inbox flooded. My streams were higher than I'd have dreamed of before, all in a few short days. I wondered what was next. I got my answer later that day when, after a brief call with my agent, I was set to start touring immediately. I would kick it off with a surprise performance that night, closing for the rock band performing at Madison Square Garden. I showed up in a limousine in a foul mood. Straight to the green room, turtleneck hitched up, talked to no one. I stared at the mirror, trying to hide my face from revealing the mix of anger and fear I felt. I knew what was coming, and I was having no more of it. I earned this performance, and I would perform, no matter what. I pulled a box cutter I had snuck in from my pocket at the same time as I yanked my turtleneck down. The face looked at the blade in my hand and my world went dark. I again woke up in my hotel bed. I had no memory of what happened the previous night, or even what day it was. My phone was again flooded with messages praising my performance at the concert. One was from an unknown number. I opened it. "Hey, last night was so much fun. I still can't believe I got to meet you. I don't know why, but you told me to tell you this morning to check the drawer next to your bed." I did. Inside was a note scrawled in handwriting that was not mine. "Try that one more time and I'll never let you up again. I'm helping you. Act like it." I was done ignoring the issue and I wouldn't let this thing control me. I sprang out of bed and stomped to the kitchenette. I picked up a knife and again went dark. When I came to, it was nighttime, though I couldn't see that at first. I was surrounded by sky-high screens whose bright light hurt my eyes. I was in Times Square and judging by the relatively sparse crowds, it must have been deep into the hours of the night. I was shirtless, pants half-zipped, with a crumpled piece of paper in one hand. I opened it up and the scrawled handwriting read, "See how easily I can end you." I looked around, afraid that someone had recognized me. I was definitely getting some looks, but I had the advantage of not being the only shirtless, crazed person there. I grabbed for my neck, realizing I had no turtleneck to cover me, and ran the 10 blocks back to my hotel. I opened my hotel room door to find a perfectly folded note on an end table. "Check your laptop." On it was an album, a new album in my voice. 12 songs, each was as beautiful as my early work, maybe better. I knew, if the world heard this, that would be it. I'd be cemented in history as one of the great singer-songwriters of my time. Within the folder on my desktop containing all the songs was a note, a text file labeled "README." "I can end your career as quickly as I can advance it. Play along like you've been doing and we can both be happy. Don't try anything like that again." I barely cared about the text file. I didn't care about anything but that brilliant album. It would give me everything. And it did. One listen to that album, and I decided to take the face up on its offer, let it do its work. That was a decade ago. For 10 full years, I've given it exactly what it wants. I haven't played a concert by myself in that time. I've barely made a public appearance, spoken to anyone outside my family. I have a wife now and a daughter who I only half know. It was slow at first. I let the other face only take over for public appearances, concerts, and the like. A few hours at a time. I think it exhausted the face to be in control for so long, as I'd always resurface feeling oddly drained. As I went on my first tour, then the second, it was in control for longer. It gave it power. I'd find hours missing from my day, hours where I wasn't in the public eye. When it began happening, I thought it was a fluke. It wasn't part of the deal. What would it want with my normal life? Then again, what was my normal life? That didn't seem to exist anymore. Everything I did, magazine interviews, songwriting coaching, vocal drills, endless hours at the gym, was for my career. No wonder the face was able to take over so easily. It's all for the public eye, all of it. It began happening more frequently. A night missing every month or so. Nights when I wasn't on stage. Nights when it should have remained beneath my beard behind my turtleneck. Now, years later, it's in control most of the time. I get a few hours a day here and there to live my life in glimpses. I'm more famous, much more, so its power keeps growing. How can I possibly fight back? Any exercise of free will results in immediate consequences. I tried to play a concert once for my daughter's birthday without letting the face take over. Not only did I lose consciousness immediately, I woke up to an extremely angry agent and record label and family over the apparent very public bender I had been on afterwards. I have no choice but to let it continue to take over. It gives me such wonderful things. I'm beloved by most. I have the fan base I had dreamed of as a child. I'm rich beyond imagination. I'm the perfect rock star. And I'm so lonely. There will come a time when I'm gone completely. Fame is all-encompassing after all.